Gay rights and religious liberty is really an unnecessary conflict in the United States.
As the Supreme Court of the United States currently defines religious liberty, gay rights and religious liberty will inevitably be in conflict.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingartner, still sitting in for Jerry Lutz. We have a topic today that is a new take or a different take on religious liberty, and we're looking forward to discussing it. Before we do, we'd like for our panelists to introduce themselves to you.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
And we welcome you. In the recent book out from Oxford Press, Gay Rights versus Religious Liberty, The Unnecessary Conflict, Andrew Koppelman advocates a solution to the impasse of whether religious vendors may refuse service to gay clients. Believing that this conflict is unnecessary, he suggests that the state grant religious exemptions permitting the refusal of service that the bakers and photographers seek under religious grounds because of their religious beliefs opposing same-sex marriage. In exchange, those vendors would have to publicly state and advertise that they refuse to be a part of same-sex weddings. The result would be twofold. First, it would prevent embarrassment of gay couples being refused service. Second, those businesses who might refuse service out of simple prejudice or bias would be deterred from doing so. Only vendors who are willing to lose business for their religious beliefs would be affected. Gay couples and others who oppose this type of discrimination would know to boycott and not use these vendors. Writes Koppelman, quote, "Those who feel they must do what their religion demands, even at great personal cost, have the strongest religious claims," unquote. In light of these issues, we'd like to ask our panelists to consider at least these three questions. One, would this policy really work to solve the particular religious liberty conflict? Why or why not? Two, would this type of solution only encourage further discrimination against gay couples? And three, if this solution works, could the same approach be used in the case of businesses who refuse to provide artificial birth control for their workers? Well, interesting questions. Anxious to hear the answers. We'll start with Dan.
So the history of the United States is one in which we see a cascading set of dominoes falling, where it was once acceptable to discriminate against certain classes of people, and then as our consciousness grew and evolved over time, we recognized that discrimination was not to be countenanced. You can look at the history of the United States and see this in so many different pockets. It was okay to discriminate against immigrants, and it was okay to discriminate against blacks. It was okay to discriminate against Jews. It was okay to discriminate against women, and it was okay to discriminate against gay men and lesbian women and people on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And over time, those senses of the permissibility of that discrimination rightfully came down as we recognize the religious truth that each of us is created in God's holy image, and the Holy One doesn't make mistakes, and that there is no greater value between one human being and another. In Jewish tradition, there is a story in the Mishnah that says, at the beginning, God created swarms of bees, bugs, bears, and birds, but only one human being. Why was that? And it was to teach that no one should say that my line is of greater value than yours, because we are all descended from the same one source. And so when we look back at American history and we see that once it was okay to deny women the vote, or it was okay for there to be signs posted in public accommodations that said, no Jews or blacks allowed, or that a black person was entitled to only 3/5 of a vote, we look back aghast at those things. And so what we also see bumping up against that is people who used religious liberty as the claim to justify their discrimination. And I don't want to minimize people's religious claims to want to live their lives in their private sphere the way they choose to live their lives. I personally have spent thousands and thousands of dollars to send my kids to private Jewish day school because I want them taught in a private context. I want them to be taught with very specific Jewish values, where those schools, as it was claimed in Lady of Guadalupe versus Morrissey Barrow, that should be allowed to discriminate as to who they hire. A Catholic school ought to be able to say, I'm only having Catholic people teach my kid. But once you enter the realm of public accommodation, I don't think that our society should countenance any religious ideology that countenances discrimination, because the fact is that if someone owns a bakery and they want to discriminate against a gay couple because their religious beliefs say, I don't want to serve gay people, the answer is not to say, well, it's okay, you don't have to serve gay people. The answer is, well, you don't have to be a baker. You want to have your own feelings, you want to have your own religious ideas about what you believe, that's fine. You can in your private sphere. In the public sphere, I think it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we protect people, especially minorities, especially those who are historically marginalized, from that kind of discrimination. So I don't see there being a conflict between one's religious liberty and one's right to be protected. I think we just have to figure out where we draw the line between private life and public accommodation.
Thank you.
Right. The word is odious that I've been searching for. Our courts have long held that the list that Rabbi Levin just ran through, that discrimination against people on that list, basically minorities within our larger culture, gay folks, people of color, Jewish people, Muslim people, that discrimination against them is odious. It is against our creation of and maintenance of a good, fair, free society. And again, one can act in certain ways in private, but when one's business enters the public sphere, when one engages in interstate commerce or even commerce within a community, discrimination becomes it becomes one's responsibility not to discriminate in those ways. The problem is, as I indicated in my opening sentence at the beginning of the program, is squarely with the Supreme Court of the United States, because it has, there are two clauses, not just one. There are two clauses, two religion clauses in the First Amendment. The First Amendment says that there shall be no establishment of religion, of any particular religion, and there shall be no restrictions on the free exercise of religion. the free exercise clause and the establishment clause. The problem with the current Supreme Court is that the pendulum, which it's their responsibility to make sure remains in some kind of balance, they have swung that pendulum so far toward free exercise that they are allowing people in the name of religion now to, in public commerce, discriminate against certain people. It is as odious for a baker who puts his or her services out in the public arena to make wedding cakes, to discriminate against a couple that wants to use that person's wedding cake for their same-sex wedding, as it would be for the motel or hotel owner that evening of the wedding to refuse accommodation to that couple. And it is as odious for either of them to do that as it would be to refuse services because their religious belief maintained that folks of African descent are the source of all problems in this world, and they therefore should be looked down upon and treated differently than the rest of us. No business should be allowed to treat any group of customers as second-class citizens, okay? And no one's religion should be able to be used to harm other people.
Thank you. Carl?
Well, I'm glad you can be so confident because and this is part of my background, because there's a time at which I believed that it was really, that I believed it was wrong for people who were in same-sex marriages, to be married, same-sex to be married, but to engage in homosexual relations or gay relations. And I really believed that it was sinful, and I believed that it was that was dangerous. And if I were a cake maker, and that was my genuine religious belief, to have someone come in and say, I would like to have this specific thing written on my cake, and I disagree with what that says, shouldn't I have the right to refuse that because it goes against my deeply held religious beliefs? If someone asked me to write something that was anti-Semitic on a cake, do I have the right to refuse that person? I mean, to what extent? I guess the issue is about the creative expression and being forced to not just provide a service, but to actually say something and use your creative services in support of something that you genuinely believe is wrong. And I kind of like what Koppelman has done here because he's at least, I know for sure, he said that racial discrimination and same-sex discrimination in this case are different categories, and that we've lumped them together, and it's created all this conflict in our society when the conflict is, in his opinion, resolvable by saying as long as the person makes a public statement in their business that they will not use their creative services in this particular way, that it allows people then to choose whether they want it allows gay couples to know, again, well, we'll be refused service here, but it also then has the financial downside for the person because it's like, well, you say you believe that, and a lot of people use their religious belief as justification for their discrimination. But what about the people who genuinely believe it? Then it seems wrong to force them to have to serve someone that they don't want to serve.
We said the same thing to all sorts of people throughout the South not too long ago, saying that you have to go against your religious beliefs and serve African American folks.
You're right.
Ken and John?
Yes.
Would you please just wrap this up?
I do think that a compliment comes up with a solution to a problem. I have two thoughts I want to say. Number one, this is an issue today. I wonder if it will be an issue 20 years from now. And I also wonder what the issue will be in 20 years from now. Because we're going to have another issue in 20 years that will be dealing with the same type of issue that we're struggling with right now. And the American Religious Town Hall in 20 years from now will be discussing that issue. It will not be wedding cakes, and it won't be florists, and it won't be same-sex marriages. But what will be that issue? And how will we respond at that point? Will we be any more enlightened than we are now? And how we deal with this? I'm actually quite sympathetic to what Carl has said. Particularly, I do think that Compliment has come up with a solution to a problem. And if a person is willing to lose that type of revenue and income for making this fancy wedding cake or whatever, and if he or she is willing to give that up, well, then that commitment and concern for that cause is really important. If it wasn't important to that person, then they would be happy to bake the cake, or in the case of the florist, to make the arrangements. I think that I'm not as critical of the court as you are, because at least until 2020, certainly the court has stood very much on the side of gay rights and has protected it. Now, what happens now, we do not know. But one can only hope that the court will continue in the same way in which they have been moving. I think that Pew has presented a very interesting poll. In 1996, 27% of the population in the United States favored same-sex marriage. 65% opposed it. This was 1996, just not even 30 years ago. Today, in 2020, the numbers are reversed. 67% favor same-sex marriage, support it, while 31% is opposed. So we've even seen within the population of this country a huge sea change in relationship to supporting this issue. And how we respond and how we deal with the minorities in this situation, I think is a very important statement in relationship to who we are as a people.
So I think that, first of all, Andrew Koppelman has been a champion of gay rights. And I appreciate his efforts to try to find a middle ground between those conservative religious folks who have the kinds of deeply held religious beliefs, Carl, in a sincere fashion that I think you define. But at the same time, what happens if you live in a community where putting that sign in the window actually does not create stigma in the way that he defines it? And one has to ask oneself, what is the purpose of anti-discriminatory legislation? What is it that we're seeking to achieve as a society when we say you can't discriminate against people on this basis or this basis or this basis? And the answer is, I think, two things. One is the one that I think Koppelman is talking about, which is access, right? People, irrespective of their heritage, their racial whatever it is, right, shouldn't have to wonder if they can show up at a hotel and get a room for the night. But to me, it's more than just access, it's safety. And what is it like to be the gay person who walks down the street to see a sign in a window, "We don't serve gay people here"? What is the quality of the moral injury that is inflicted by having a society that allows for that to take place? To say, you're not welcome here. And I think that we're trying to create a society in which in the private sphere, I can teach what I want to teach. I can profess whatever belief I want to profess. I can teach my children whatever I want to teach them. I can send them to whatever house of worship that is going to inculcate those beliefs, whatever they are. That is America. We have the right to profess those beliefs. But once we get into the private sphere, we have to create not just access, but safety for each and every American to live their lives in their most authentic self.
What Koppelman responds is, it's in the moderator's statement, gay couples and others who oppose this type of discrimination would know to boycott and not use these vendors. Now, that doesn't answer the other side of the coin of how it deals with the gay couple itself or those people.
We'll finish this after the break.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the town hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
We're so happy again that you've joined us. We're having a great discussion today. We have lots of discussions here, as you know, every week, and we'd like to invite you, as the break said, we'd like to invite you to send something in, to call us, to let us know, to give us an email, so that we know what you want to hear discussions about from our esteemed panels. We are excited to cover those subjects. Also, we are very grateful to our sponsor. This show has been going for 60 years now, and we're so excited that it continues to be an opportunity for learning for many, many people. And so we're grateful for the sponsor for doing that for us. Right now, we'd like to go to our summations, and we're going to begin now with Ken and John.
I think that what is really important that is coming out of the discussion today is the need for consistency in relationship to how do we deal with these different cases, be they the issues that you're talking about or the particular issue of religious liberty, particularly in the conflict of same-sex unions. It seems to me that the courts have always been quite positive in moving this along, and yet at the same time, courts change, and we have to be also very aware of what might be happening. But I think that Koppelman here comes up with a solution in relationship to, for the cake people, bakers and the candlestick makers, as well as the people who did the flowers, to be able to find a way in which they can save their own integrity if it's really a religious dynamic that is of concern to them. And if it's that much of a concern that they do not want to service a gay couple, then so be it, and they don't get their money. However, I also see the huge pitfall in that discussion as well, and it might just not work.
Huh?
Thank you. I think that one of the things we need to think about is the context in which the discrimination takes place. If it is a context in which there are other vendors, there are other suppliers of the good that is sought, the service that is sought, that's one thing. In many, many communities, however, that is not the case. And for one person with his or her religious beliefs shutting out a group of people would effectively shut out that group of people, period.
Carl?
I have that concern as well. I mean, here's the question I have: is this really about this baker not serving cakes at a wedding? In other words, if a gay couple came in and just ordered a donut in the morning, I think it's wrong to discriminate against them just because they're gay to not serve them a donut. But to actually have to participate in their wedding and celebration of it when they oppose that ethically and morally, that seems like a fair line to me, because it's about the celebration of about the specific act that they consider to be immoral. It isn't about discriminating against gay people. You can't just do that.
Dan?
Well, with respect, I'm not sure that there isn't a fairly slippery slope between one and the other. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is Ibram X. Kendi, in his work on anti-racism, talks about how we often think that attitudes and change of attitudes leads to a change in policy, when actually he discovers that it's actually the reverse, that the change in policy is what leads to the change in attitude. So when the amendments to the Constitution that forbade discrimination on the basis of race came into being in the 1960s, this country was not at all sure that that was okay. Mm-hmm. And now there is enormous stigma around discrimination on the basis of race. And his thought, and I think I am sensitive to it, is that if you have a policy that says it's okay to discriminate in this fashion, you're validating that impulse, which is why I think it's not a far jump to say, I'm not going to bake a cake for your wedding, to I'm not going to let you eat cake at all. And I think we have to, as we would say, let them eat cake.
The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.